What is going on, everyone? Adam Gelman here again. Just been putting a lot of effort into making some new YouTube content for this new channel I've been able to be a part of with WTC's network here. My goal with a lot of these videos has been to provide some context and education for new collectors and wrestling collectors who don't have a lot of experience outside of wrestling cards to be able to get context around what is going on in the market as it pertains to WWE cards. And these Tales of the Tape videos, this one about Revolution Galactics, is an opportunity for those individuals to learn more about how they are approaching their collections and how they might approach the market for these cards. And I really thank Tony for giving me the opportunity on the network here to be able to describe a little bit of my experience and be able to showcase a little bit of how I've come to understand the Revolution market, especially as it pertains to the galactic parallels of these cards. So for this tale of the tape, I'm going to take a deep dive into why the Galactics have become such a feature of Revolution, why the Revolution market for WWE has played out the way that it has, and why there are so many people looking for these cards. Mainly because of the the crossover from other Revolution sets, whether it be NBA or soccer or otherwise, but because it's such an awesome card and it's such a cool looking parallel, this is an opportunity for people to get some of that context and be able to sort of connect the dots a little bit. So let's go back a little bit to the beginning of what drove Revolution to the places that it is right now. Because when it was built, it was not really delivering in the way that a lot of people expected it would. And it was released kind of in between the beginning of the 2010 Panini movement and the boom itself in 2020. Revolution was started kind of right in the middle of that in the NBA, and it was built as a set that was supposed to be a cheap product, right? It was a product that didn't cost a lot of money per box, had some fun chase to it, had some collector sort of focused parallel groupings within the card, and was really designed for people to have, a fun experience trying to put together sets, put together rainbows of the players that they liked, chase some rookies, a couple of autographs here and there. But overall, this was really one of the first sets to deliver a product configuration that was not focused around autographs. So, when you look at like the history of Panini when they started in 2010, taking over from Donruss Leaf Playoff, like every set that came out in the course of a calendar year was 100% focused on delivering relic content, autograph content, and some base cards, right? There was rarely a set that was released, even the flagship products, that did not deliver at least some of that element every single box. Revolution was one of the first products in the new sort of era of modern cards that took that and sort of turned it on its head, where it was trying to make a cheap product that they could release without a huge amount of budget around autographs, a huge amount of budget in creating relic cards and acquiring the relics to be actually put in the cards. Because remember, this was before the player worn sort of revolution that happened, after the fact. But I'll get to that in a second. So I think the Revolution's concept was incredibly unique, and it did not go over well. Like I think upon the first release, Revolution really sort of fell flat on its face in a lot of ways. Like people just couldn't understand paying $60 and not getting a guaranteed hit. Most of those cases were delivered, with three or four autographs in them. And so when people were chasing cards, they started to recognize that the autograph wasn't the sort of chase. Now, tr- fast forward a year or two, and all of a sudden, when the boom starts to take off, which is like in the 2017, 2018 sort of first initial part of that trajectory, Prism and Select and the shiny products that were released across all of these different platforms, those really sort of built on that expectation that collectors had had from Revolution, because even though the autographs were included in every box, they were no longer the most valuable part of the box break. So you look at Prism and you look at Select, the most valuable cards in the products don't have autographs on them. They are the base cards in gold and black formats. Here with Revolution, it's the same thing. The most valuable card in the product is not the autograph. And in fact, the autograph checklists for the first few NBA products were pretty god awful. because Panini wanted to break people of the habits of expecting autographs in every single box, even if those autographs were junk 75% of the time. And with Revolution, they wanted to create value in the actual cards themselves and do that without adding to the product budget, right? So if you think of the way that a card product is usually built, you have the cost of actually like printing the sets. You have the cost of getting and acquiring relics, whether that be player worn, which is not game used, or game used, which is exponentially more expensive, inserting those into cards, cutting the cards, die cutting the cards, whatever, so that the relic windows are there, assembling them, putting stickers on the cards. Like there's a lot of cost in bringing hit-based content to a product. And that's not even outside the autograph contracts that exist, so that you're paying this player X number of dollars per card. How do you create value in a product without autographs and without adding more autographs? And for a long time that was impossible. Like it was really difficult for that to do. Topps had some success with Topps Chrome being able to generate value in Bowman and Topps Chrome based products, where you could have a red refractor, a gold refractor out of 5 and 10 carry a ton of value. The superfractor carrying a ton of value, even though there was no autographs on those cards. There were some autographed versions of those cards that were still more money. So I mean, like a lot of this was being toyed with. It wasn't really successful until Prism took off, and I talked about this in one of my earlier videos, which is, for Prism, it's about the base cards, and that's a foreign concept for a lot of WWE collectors, because for so long WWE products hinged on the value of the autographs included in every box. Revolution does not deliver that, and Prism is not based on that. And so it's that you can see why these sets are so foreign in concept for a lot of WWE collectors who have only existed in the hobby where the value in a product is delivered through the autographs. So let's talk about why the Galactics became the keystone of this set, right? And these Galactics are really good looking cards. Like most of the Revolution stuff is, doesn't really hit the parts of the card market that I really like. They're kind of like gaudy, flashy cards. The inserts go a whole lot of different ways. It's just not my favorite set. A lot of autographs are kind of like, they're there. But these cards, are really cool to have in hand, and they don't photograph very well. So until you have the opportunity to hold one in your hands, it might be difficult to appreciate how cool they really are. And it's interesting because you only get one or two of them per case, and each case is two inner cases of 8 boxes. So that means that when you buy a case from Panini, you're going to have to buy 16 boxes, or to get a Galactic, or a guaranteed one, or 8 boxes and take your chances. Now, I've seen some cases where there are 2 Galactics per case. I've seen some cases where there's 1 Galactic per case. Sometimes that Galactic is an insert, sometimes it's a base card, and sometimes that guy is Ivar. So, like, you're going to have a lot of times where you're ripping through hundreds and hundreds of dollars of product, and you're pulling a card that isn't going to be one of those desirable sort of superstars. So when you look at the prices of Galactics, you have your normal bench players that aren't LeBron James, aren't Tom Brady, aren't those level of superstars. You have, guys like Angelo Dawkins, Jimmy Uso, NXT UK wrestler, creator wrestler #2. Like all of those guys don't carry a lot of value in the hobby, and their Galactic cards don't carry a lot of value either. So you could be ripping through these hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of products, or buying slots in these products, hitting a Galactic and still not getting a lot of value out of it. But when you hit somebody like The Rock, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, like Sasha Banks, Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, like the top desirable names, those tend to be case hit worthy sort of pulls, right? So if a case of Revolution at this point, when the boxes are $50 to $60 a piece, is probably, close to $1,000 after taxes. You've got a bunch of other things to consider, and that's if you get lucky to find a full case sealed, where you don't have to like sort of go diving through a number of different things. You could easily see those things pop up where you're pulling an insert Galactic, which is not the base card that everybody wants, but still pretty valuable if you get a desirable name, instead of just pulling one of these base ones of the main guys, Roman Reigns, whoever, and really sort of cashing in on a top pull there. And the reason that these cards are so valuable is because I believe there's probably 5 to 10 of these that are out there. And I believe that some of the cards are printed more than others. So there may even be variation in between the Galactic sets where you have some cards that are going to be printed more, some cards that are going to be printed less. And the ones that tend to be printed less are even more tougher to find and therefore more valuable when they pop up. And then you have all the people that want to fight over them, right? So you have the player collectors like me who only collect one person and want that one person for their collection because I know from my experience in other sports that Galactic cards drive a significant value in the hobby. You pull Steph Curry, you pull LeBron James, you've got a pretty significant card. And it's cool that they've brought these now to WWE where you can get that as well. And a lot of the Revolution photos are really good looking photos too, and they're good looking cards. So they're cool to have on display because they sort of like dance in the light and they've got this cool pattern. So I want those. And there's also people who have been trying to get as many of the Galactics as they can because they're set collectors or because they want to collect, top level cards in WWE. So I'm competing against them. And if there's only 5 or so of these and the product has a much larger run than something like Impeccable or something like Select, which also has retail, like there is no retail version of this. Like these cards are hard to come by. And so if we're thinking there's probably, double the run of what Impeccable is, so if Impeccable is like 2,000, 2,100 cases, there could be like 4,000, 5,000 cases of Revolution. And you've got a 1 in 16 chance of pulling it, and even longer of chances because the checklist is so big. So you can imagine that there's a lot of challenge in acquiring these cards, and that's why I think there's so much of these, so much desire around acquiring these for your collection. And we've also seen that not many people sort of understand the place in the hobby quite yet, but I feel like year 2, year 3, we could see a completely different marketplace than what we're seeing right now. I'm not saying these cards are going to triple in value or quadruple in value, but I think they're going to become harder and harder to find, which means that when the good, desirable ones pop up, there's going to be more people who are looking for them and see the prices jump all over the place. There have been ones that have been sitting on eBay for a while, right, with gigantic prices or just sitting because there's not somebody looking for it at that point. And so you've seen prices go all over the place for these cards, especially for the lesser desirable ones. For the more desirable ones, we saw The Rock and Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin sell for pretty good money off the bat, but they haven't come up enough to see how the market is adjusted as more and more time has passed since the release and more releases have come out. So that's always a challenge is like as more sets are released, does that mean that more and more of these cards are going to fall by the wayside? I think there's a pretty significant chance that that happens. But if you're like me and say like, wow, these Galactics were cool in NBA, they're going to be cool in WWE, I want them for my collection, you might be competing against 3 to 4 other people who also want them for their collections. So I think as collectors are starting to recognize how scarce these are, there's going to be probably some competition in some of the more desirable areas. Now, if you're the guy that collects, Dewdrop, like, I don't know if that's going to be the case. If there's more than one Dewdrop collector, maybe it goes a little bit above where a Dewdrop card normally sells for. If you're the guy that, collects Blair Davenport out of NXT UK, maybe, that's not as valuable as somebody who collects, I don't know, like Ultimate Warrior, right? So there's a really good chance that, you know, the checklist will vary according to the desirability of the superstars, where the value of the cards reflect more of like, hey, a low card, low on the card wrestler is going to sell a lot lower than a high on the card wrestler. This is the same as it was in Prism, right? The top name sold for way up here, and the junk name sold for way down here because they're not as investor friendly and there's not as much competition. Alexa Bliss, there's a lot of competition. Hulk Hogan, there's a lot of competition. But when you see like Revolution specifically, it's a really cheap product to rip, and it's really cheap comparatively to what some of these cards are worth. You rip a $50 box, you get lucky. Maybe one of these cards is worth $500. Maybe one of these cards is worth $1,000. And that's a really cool proposition when you also see that you could the autograph checklist has people like Austin and Triple H and The Undertaker and so on and so forth. So like it's really crazy that Revolution has the ability to deliver like that when you're seeing what a focus checklist can bring on the autograph side in competition now with base cards that are also selling for a ton of money without autographs. Um, Similarly, like there are lava cards that are specifically numbered to 10. So that's what is going to confuse a lot of people is like, well, this card I know only has 10 copies. This card I know only has 25 copies. Why is a Galactic where we don't know how many copies there are worth more than something where I do know how much copies there are? And that's where the mainstream hobby has dictated pricing above and beyond how many copies exist. So if we find out that, and we won't, but let's say we find out Galactics have 20 copies, it's still likely that they're going to have more collectability and more favorable market presence than a lava out of 10, even though the lava is more rare. It's because of the collector loyalty, it's because of the standards set in the hobby. Now, the reason that this was even popular in the first place is because sets like National Treasures, because sets like Prism were too expensive. So people gravitated now towards these sets. That's why Revolution gained a following when it didn't have it originally. Because when when Revolution was originally released, Prism wasn't where it is right now. National Treasures was high, it just wasn't as high as it is right now, where the top rookie patch autograph sells for $30,000, $40,000, $100,000. Like that wasn't what was happening when Revolution was first released. So there wasn't as much of a gap between the lower tiers of the hobby and the upper tiers of the hobby. Once the upper tiers of the hobby became you got to be rich to participate or make some really good judgment calls, people started flocking to sets like Revolution to be able to deliver more value, even though they were cheaper boxes. So to wrap this up, I think, as we're approaching the market going forward, getting into years 3 and 4, because I think people are way too focused on kind of this near term without recognizing that even if Fanatics buys out Panini, even if Panini eventually is sort of absorbed or closes down, these cards are going to be released multiple times over. And Panini has a license through 2026. It's possible that Fanatics buys them out and it incorporates them into Tops. Does that mean Revolution survives? I think that's still a speculative question mark. Um, but regardless, I think there is going to be a year 2 of Revolution. I think there's going to be maybe a year 3, depending if how long it takes for the Fanatics buyout to take place. Um, if Panini just continues down the path and finishes out their license, we could get multiple more years of this. But I think looking back on the first year where you have great looking cards and great looking pictures, like, these cards could see an increase in collectability because of that situation. I think there's also a chance that people just give up on stuff like this and say, well, the crossover hasn't been as successful as it once was, so I'm not going to sort of take the investment risk that I did before. The hobby is kind of going down the drain, so maybe things contribute to that as well. But overall, like I think this is just something fun to pass the time. If Panini's only going to release 6 to 8 sets a year, why not take a chance on something like this when they look as cool as these do? Um, so for my collection, I've got my couple of Galactics that I've already collected. I know a lot of other people love the tag team cards. They love the tag team cards, love the individual sort of cards that they've been able to put together, whether it's the lift off die cut ones or the supernova cards that have such great render photos on them. Like all of those have galactic parallels, so a lot of people have been chasing them. We've seen some crazy prices, like we've seen cards that like for Carmella that shouldn't sell the way that they do, but for the galactic parallels they sell at a multiplier of what it should be expecting. Like that's what competition does because there's so few of these cards to go around. It's really true scarcity, and Panini doesn't like numbering these types of cards. So when you think about like what Prism has done with the Color Blast, we don't know how many Color Blasts there are. When we look at something like the Tiger Stripes, the Zebras, the stuff that I talked about in my first video, we don't know how many of those cards exist. And we're never going to. We can speculate based on print runs and how hard they are to pull. Like, we know that there's X number of cases of select, and the zebras are a case hit. So, how many zebras exist for each parallel? I think that varies. But this is a really interesting sort of use case for it. There's no numbering. They're insanely rare at one per case, one per master case. Sorry. And they don't pop up very often because when people pull them, they either don't recognize what it is and they sort of put it in a box, or they do recognize what it is and they don't want to sell it because it looks cool. And that also sort of contributes to the value too, because I've seen people post the cards not knowing what they are on eBay at really low prices and they get snapped up right away. And then that comp is there, and all of a sudden people are saying, well, that's what that's worth, even though it sold 5 seconds after it was listed. If people know what they have and list it appropriately, the cards usually sell above where they would normally be selling for like a lava or something else. But every so often things go crazy and collectors are new and don't understand. And they post these cards for low amounts and then somebody buys them right away. Is that an accurate representation of the market? I'm not sure. I don't think so. If that is posted and it sits for 5 days and then sells, then sure, maybe that is a more accurate representation. But if somebody lists it at $10 and it's $100 card, what's the true market value of these cards? And I think that's where multiple years of Revolution will help to flush that out. So don't even think we're there yet with Prism. I don't think we're there yet with Select. I definitely don't think we're there with Revolution. I think the market still has a lot of adjustments that still need to be made, especially as WWE collectors become more and more familiar with market trends and how the mainstream hobby impacts the value of Panini cards. And hopefully, as the buyout happens or as Panini changes their course, we get more stuff like this. We are seeing some of that coming in Chronicles. We are seeing some of that happen in Select. We definitely saw that happen in Impeccable, which I'm going to cover in a later video. So, I mean, like, some of these things are naturally occurring because the mainstream hobby goes to these places every single time. And when the mainstream hobby decides that this is what they want to do, the market usually follows it along that same path. So let's keep an eye on this. If you have a discussion, follow me on Twitter. My handle is at SC Uncensored. Follow me on Instagram. I am at WWE Gelman. You can visit my website at www.sportscardsuncensored.com. Engage in this discussion. I want to hear your thoughts. Put it in the comment, like and subscribe. We'll be doing more of these videos on this channel. So thank you very much for watching. Excited to talk to you guys further.